Since I was a child, I saw myself in a family with a loving and caring wife at my side, wonderful children, and a happy ending. But as is often the case, all of my ambitions and plans were dashed at the last minute when my wife decided that before having children, she needed to take a little more walk. Jim Deshaies, the Chicago Cubs baseball analyst, never fails to entertain me. On a Saturday afternoon, I logged in to see my favorite Cubs play the Cincinnati Reds on Premier Sports. During a break in the game at the famous Wrigley Field, Deshaies, who had a successful career with the Houston Astros, was applauding the lovely kid of a fan in the stands. Quality Baby has become somewhat of a hallmark for him. And I'm not the only one who looks forward to the moments when Deshaies spots a young admirer in the audience. The Cubs' dominant 7-2 lead in the fifth inning, along with the Reds' pitching change during the break, added to the excitement. My wife of 6 years just come in with another beer for me and a glass of wine for herself. My focus changed from the Quality Baby to my wife. Sorry, JD, but the sight of my wife in snug, short jean shorts and a fitting halter top was far more appealing. My wife taunted, looking at the huge screen, "Having quality baby time." "Yeah, but nothing beats quality wife time," I said, making her blush as she sat beside me on the sofa. I wasn't quite restrained, so I started staring at her. "You guys are so easy to understand," she chuckled, allowing her breasts to jiggle slightly as she shrugged. We sat in silence, watching the Cubs score 2 more runs, before Vivian decided it was time to talk during the commercial break. "Hey, why don't we go to Chicago next weekend and start off our quality baby-making time with some fun?" Vivian proposed joyfully. "You could watch a Cubs game and I could go shopping or something." I saw Vivian's suggestion with the or whatever and gave her a sideways glance. "You would not want to attend the game with me." "Am I contagious or what?" I teased innocently. I felt her body tighten against mine. "Well, I figured we could each have some me time that weekend before we dive into the hole, chuck the birth control pills, and start our families," she said, flashing me her beautiful grin and dazzling blue eyes. She was well known that I seldom refused her requests, especially when accompanied by her alluring smile. She'd been using that method on me for the past 8 years, 6 of which we'd been married. However, something about that moment felt odd to me. I didn't completely oppose her approach, but I also didn't passionately embrace it. "Sure, we can work it out. Let's head to Chicago." I said this without much excitement. "We can both take Friday off and go up there Thursday evening. I will make the arrangements." "Trust me," Vivian exclaimed passionately. It appeared to be a little glitch, and I didn't think about it again until late Friday afternoon in our hotel room, when I turned on the TV to watch ESPN. We'd already had lunch at a neighborhood eatery and gone to the Shed Aquarium. "So, what is the plan for dinner?" I questioned Vivian while I considered what to dress for the evening. She didn't answer right away, and when I looked from the television to my wife, I swear I saw her shiver briefly. "Tonight is the Cubs game against the St. Louis Cardinals. You're sitting just behind the Cubs dugout on the third base side." "I thought you could eat and drink there," Vivian explained. "For me, it's dinner. The evening will conclude with drinks and dancing at one of the city's best clubs. I'm not sure when I'll return, and I don't plan to be around much on Saturday either. Then, when we get home on Sunday night, we can have our pill-dissolving ritual and begin planning our family." Wait, are you serious? I'm not going to allow you go out alone in Chicago for 2 nights in one day. "What about us? How about our promises?" I virtually shrieked. Vivian glanced at me as if I were a slow child who needed an explanation. The latter part of the judgment was correct. We've been talking about having children when we both turned 30 since before we married. "Okay, CU, we're there now, but I've decided that because I'll be doing the majority of the heavy lifting, I deserve a treat." "A reward? Seriously?" I do not recall a reward provision in our wedding vows. I let out a growl. "You will not be the one carrying the child for 9 months, giving up your toned physique or putting your career on wait to raise the child. But I'll be the one working hard to support our family, missing out on milestones such as the first word." "Doesn't that count for anything?" I inquired, bordering on the pitiful. She dismissed my concerns as if they were nothing. "We have been together for 8 years. Q. Have I ever given you reason to mistrust my love or commitment? The answer is no. So I want something for me. A bonus. A weekend affair, not love, but yearning for a day and a half. Then we can stop using birth control pills, and it will just be you and me forever. Damn, woman, all I can hear is myself. I snapped. Do you know the saying? There is no I team, there's also no I in us. But if you go through with this, there will no longer be a us. So if I agree to this, it will be just you and me forever? But what if we want to have another child? Same thing. In either case, it will not happen in this lifetime. Do you notice a lobotomy scar on my forehead? I wasn't looking for your approval, Q. I don't need it, she emphasized. I was informing you about what was going to happen. I am capable of making decisions regarding my own body. This will not change who we are. Once you laid aside your ego, not mine, sweetie, I'd have to deal with your enormous selfishness before I could even think about my own. I responded harshly. Perhaps I should go have the same kind of fun as you? She seemed taken surprised. The superior attitude she had displayed minutes before had evaporated, and she appeared uncertain. She went for her phone and sent me my Cubs tickets for the night. You drive the car, and I'll take an Uber to my destination, she replied, evidently recognizing I wasn't that type of person. With an angry shake of my head, I collected my keys and phone and left the room without looking back. I could only guess she imagined I was going to the baseball game as a devoted, soon-to-be cuckolded partner. Rather than attending the Cubs game in person, I decided to listen to the radio while driving home. Pat Hughes and the Cubs were in excellent form, as they secured another victory. I had no real plan other than to put some distance between myself and Vivian. It's discouraging when your perception of someone differs significantly from reality. Vivian Langer was a teller at my bank when I went in to collect my first paycheck from the National Transportation Company where I had recently been recruited. She had only been in the bank for a few weeks, having just graduated with a degree in finance. I stood in line, admiring the small blonde with green eyes and what appeared to be a large bust beneath her exquisite top. She effortlessly conducted brief discussions with consumers while swiftly managing their transactions. Previously, it was my turn at her window. You know, your employer can set up direct deposit for your paycheck so you don't have to wait in these queues every Friday, she told me, smiling brightly. I was aware of the reality, as the company's payroll director had informed me before to my appointment. However, I prefer the traditional technique of receiving an actual paycheck over the summers, having worked for my father as a child. Because electronic transactions were not an option, I developed the habit of paying my checks in person. I felt at ease sticking to the old-school way. Besides, absolutely, but if I switched to electronic payments, I'd have no reason to visit you. I noticed Vivian's name on the plaque next to her window. She blushed pleasantly and responded with a radiant grin, anxiously biting her bottom lip. I realized there could be mutual interest over the following 2 weeks. I purposefully chose Vivian's line, even though there was a shorter wait at another teller station. Despite the other teller's invitations, I merely smiled and waved to Vivian, who understood my preferences. While I believe myself to be composed and logical, I am also confident in my interactions with women. The following week, I got the bravery to ask Vivian out on a date, and she agreed. Vivian proved to be outgoing and intelligent. Her parents, who came from a wealthy family that still supported some aspects of her lifestyle, confessed that her father, a well-known attorney in our area, had a soft spot in his heart for his youngest and only daughter. It became clear that Vivian frequently obtained what she wanted thanks to her father's financial wealth and influence. Vivian and her parents were pleased that I was moving up the ranks at Bishop Enterprises. As our relationship progressed, John Langer made it clear that he expected me to continue the lifestyle that his daughter had become accustomed to. Quincy, treat my daughter well and fulfill your obligations to her and her mother, and I will welcome you like a member of the family. However, mistreat her or worse, lay a hand on her, and you will have a lifelong enemy with many allies, John informed me. Yes, Quincy is my given name, and it is what Vivian and almost everyone else knows me as. Q. For 4 generations, the firstborn son in every Novaro family has been named Quincy, and my uncle is still alive. My parents refer to me as 4. Vivian's parents are the lone exception to the rule. With the exception of John and Barbara, everyone in the Langer family refers to me as Q. Vivian and I had a lavish wedding 20 months after our first date, which Aston arranged for both me and my parents. A state judge officiated the ceremony, and one of our visitors was a United States Senator whom Vivian affectionately calls Uncle Isham. Before we married, Vivian and I resolved to postpone having children until we reached the age of 30 so that we could advance in our jobs and financially. Her 30th birthday was 2 weeks before our weekend vacation to Chicago. By midnight, I'd packed 2 suitcases and piled the majority of my prized possessions into the trunk of my car. I called my younger brother Bill, who agreed to let me stay hidden at his house an hour away for a few days while I figured out my life. Both he and his wife vowed to keep my whereabouts private, even if it meant misleading my wife, who had most likely not noticed I had left Chicago yet, distracted as she was with her lover. I was confident she'd catch on by Sunday morning. We have a scheduled return home. That night I couldn't sleep as I wondered what had caused Vivian to seek consolation in the arms of another man and why I had accepted it. Perhaps, I mused, my constant efforts to satisfy her wishes had caused her to regard me as weak or submissive. She'd soon realize how mistaken she was. On Saturday morning, I took care of all the tedious financial activities that might be considered cliché, such as canceling our joint credit cards and transferring half of our funds to an account solely in my name. I couldn't tell if Vivian returned to our room on Saturday to find me gone or if she stayed out from Friday night until Sunday morning. Nonetheless, I received her first text message on Sunday at 9 a.m. "Where are you now? We need to leave by 11, she messaged. I texted my brother and we chuckled while we sipped our slush margaritas on his back patio. He rose to tend to the bratwursts that were cooking on the grill for our brunch. Meanwhile, my darling sister-in-law was in the kitchen making some homemade potato salad. When life throws you a curveball, nothing beats the comfort of family. Another message arrived 30 minutes later conveying much the same feeling and was quickly followed by a flurry of progressively dismal voicemails. Her 10 o'clock message came as a strong reminder that she had no way to get home. Even as I drove us up there, the ensuing voicemail was rife with rage and threats, followed by one of frantic pleas as she clearly battled to extend her stay at the hotel, hampered by the cancellation of her 2 credit cards. Damn, those margaritas struck the spot. Not a chance. Sharon, my sister-in-law, wondered if he'd reconcile with the silly woman. "You two appear to have a strong marriage, and I know you still feel strongly for her. I'd have done anything for her, and I recognize that it won't disappear overnight. But the way she handled this problem indicates that at best, I am second on her list of priorities, after herself." My brother's phone called at 5 p.m., while the 3 of us were still on the back porch, having consumed several margaritas. He showed me the caller ID and raised his eyebrows, giving me the option of answering if I wanted. I mouthed, "Absolutely not." He gave the phone to Sharon, who, unlike Bill and myself, was still pretty sober. "Hello, Vivian. I'm picking up Bill's phone since he's too drunk to answer it." "Yes, we are aware of what occurred." "No, we do not know where he is right now." "How could you do that to such a kind-hearted man, Viv?" Sharon said. I could only picture Vivian's answer from the other end of the call. Sharon rolled her eyes a few times and groaned as she replied twice, then again. She eventually wished Vivian good luck and ended the call. "I bought you some time. You owe me," Sharon snapped at me. "Did you notice you had a fight with her and left without allowing her to explain? You are truly insensitive, you know." "You don't believe that?" I began. "No, I do not." "Q, I'm only reflecting what she said and what she's probably telling others while trying to find you," Sharon said. "Damn," I mumbled. "Please pour me another margarita." Bill obliged once more, demonstrating why I considered him a wonderful sibling. 8 margaritas deep. I wasn't going to qualify for Mensa membership anytime soon, despite having a hangover on Monday morning. I arrived at work on time, albeit dressed inappropriately. Stepping into my boss's office, I informed him of my decision to resign or transfer to another office immediately. "Are you jumping the gun?" my boss replied sarcastically. "What's the rush?" "Q," I told him everything, including my half-formed intention to disappear temporarily. With any luck, it would buy me some time away from my wife, or rather my father-in-law, who would take some time to locate me if he even attempted while requesting a move. I requested that my supervisor change my employee name to Oliver, my middle name, and that no personal information about me be shared, at least within legal bounds, in less than 5 minutes. My supervisor had arranged for my next employment. The Santa Fe office in New Mexico had an opening for me, and within 30 minutes, Oliver Navarro was on his way to a new beginning. Officially, Quincy Navarro was no longer linked with Indiana, and officially, I no longer worked for Bishop Enterprise. A week later, I started in my new role. The business set up a one-bedroom apartment for my new single existence, as well as a new phone and provider, to ensure that calls and bills could not be traced back to my wife. I only told a few trustworthy people at home about my new phone number. My parents were among those excluded. According to my brother, Mom conveyed her displeasure with my conduct and appeared to be side with Vivian. I had no intention of dealing with her judgment or risking her sharing my phone number to Viv. My father was an unintentional casualty in this fight. I was aware that if I shared my contact information with him, my mother might eventually urge him to reveal it, posing a potential problem between us. So I decided not to involve him. However, Bill and Sharon were trustworthy confidants, and I was confident my mother would not get my phone number from them. Despite her relentless efforts, Vivian attempted to notify Bill that I had left her city. It took her about a week to understand this. "How can we reconcile if we are unable to talk or confront one another?" she asked. "Bill, maybe he doesn't want to reunite with Viv. Did you truly hurt him in Chicago?" Bill described his response to her. "It was only 2 nights, Bill. It didn't mean anything," she insisted. "Perhaps not to you, but to him it meant everything," Bill responded. My job in Santa Fe continued nicely for the next year, even though I wasn't actively looking for it. My social life was non-existent, which suited me well. I occasionally had Bill check to see if I was still legally married. Surprisingly, Viv had not started divorce proceedings. I couldn't help wondering why. I occasionally joined my coworkers to spend the evening after work, but I didn't go on my first date until after around 8 months of living in Santa Fe. According to Bob Seeger, she was a stunning woman with black hair and fascinating eyes that exuded charm. She was of mixed ethnicity, half Pueblo and half Hispanic, and her strong, muscular legs were wonderful, especially since we ended up in the same bed. We met several times, but I realized she was looking for a long-term relationship, which I couldn't offer her. 2 months later, in my favorite quiet pub, I met Evangelina, also known as Angel, who was born while sitting at the bar. She epitomized the traditional Irish charm with her dark red hair, freckles, and vivid blue eyes. It was eventually discovered that she had the legendary Irish temper as well. Still dressed in my jacket and tie, following a long day at work, I was nursing a shot of Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey when a woman's voice said, "The one at the bar is mine, girls. You each find your own." As a group of women entered, I assumed they had just done a shift at one of the nearby industries, as they were all dressed in jeans and work shirts. The person approaching me had her shirt partially open, showing a generous dick all over. I couldn't help but watch her stroll with her bosom bouncing. "What's on the menu tonight, Mr. Fancy Suit Guy?" she inquired, smiling broadly and her eyes dancing. "Tennessee, honey. Does that tickle your fancy?" I responded. Angel and I spent the evening talking, dancing, and drinking. She revealed that she was having a rare night out while her 2-year-old was with a babysitter. With a tinge of embarrassment, she revealed that the child's father was unknown to her. I ended up drinking a little too much, finding myself alone, and I believe I was drugged by 2 guys I was hanging out with at the party that night. Taught me a few good lessons, the most important of which was that neither I nor my friends would ever leave a pub alone with a man unless we had come with him. She indicated that we would either leave all together or in pairs. But my daughter is a blessing. She is the most precious thing in my life. She took out her phone, tapped a few times, and showed me a photo of a cute toddler. "Do you have children?" she asked. "I don't think parenthood is in the cards for me," I responded. Starting with the narrative of how I ended up in Santa Fe. Wow, that's rough. "But are you still married to her?" "You should take care of it," she insisted. "I know I should. But at the time, all I wanted was to get away immediately. Furthermore, there is the matter of actually communicating with her. Angel and I went on a few single occasions before I began engaging her daughter in our activities. Eleanor was initially reserved about me, but I went down to her level and talked with her. I had read about that method someplace, and whoever proposed it was fantastic. Angel said I quickly became her favorite adult. When Angel and I were cuddling on the couch, Eleanor would grab my hand and bring me to the floor, where she would snuggle into my lap like a puppy and fall asleep. It seemed to impress Angel, but I must say that I also loved it. Angel and I had a nice rapport, but we never discussed exclusivity. She admitted to seeing someone else on occasion early on in our relationship. I wasn't under the impression that Angel and I were in it for the long haul, and since she was open about it, I had no objections to her continuing her other relationship. As they say, assumptions can be deceptive. I just assumed Bobby, the other person in Angel's life, was a man. We never mentioned Bobby, just as I assumed she had not discussed me with him. However, about 3 months into our relationship, she casually recalled going shopping for bikinis with Bobby a few days before. And, wait, what? I interjected. Bobby is a woman whose name is spelled B-O-B, as opposed to Robert. Yeah, it is correct. Didn't I mention that before? Bobby is a woman, a lesbian, and I am bisexual. Are you certain we haven't addressed this? Angel responded. She avoided eye contact and fidgeted with her hands. I shook my head quietly, caught off guard. Is this a concern for you, Oliver? She muttered gently. I'd never given it any thought before. While I knew bisexual people, I had never dated one consciously. It took me a moment to realize that the gender of the other person in her relationship had no bearing on our connection. Do you think I should be concerned if she is so attractive? I inquired. I find women more attractive than guys, and if she's really lovely, I may feel inadequate in comparison. She is attractive, but I don't believe you should be too concerned. You both bring unique qualities to the table. She comforted me with a laugh. She remarked it lightly. Did I ever tell you I am bisexual? To minimize misunderstandings or broken feelings, I usually bring this out early in my dates. So, will you be curious about what we do together? Are you so nosy? I teased. No, I never felt the need to inquire about your personal life while I thought Bobby was a man, and it doesn't change now that I know she's a woman. We are not exclusive, and we respect your privacy, exactly as mine is mine. So she's lovely, and I pretended to be serious, but she saw through my facade. Who do you think Eleanor prefers? I inquired jokingly. You, obviously. She responded with a grin. Over time, I became Eleanor's backup caregiver, gaining written authorization to pick her up when Angel needed to work late. I even fitted a child car seat in my Mustang to ensure her safety during our drives. My phone rang a few months later, and the caller ID displayed Bobby Clarkson's name. I did not instantly connect the dots. Angel had not told me Bobby's last name, and there appeared to be only one reason for her to call me. As I picked up Bobby, nearly panicked, he told me that Angel had been killed in a vehicle accident on her way home from work. The authorities phoned Bobby after discovering Angel's phone, which had Bobby mentioned several times in her call history, and rushed to the hospital. Bobby learned that Angel had died among her anguish. Bobby recognized Eleanor needed to be brought up from the babysitter, and Angel had indicated that I was authorized to do so. We agreed to meet at Angel's place after I fetched Ellie Norrie and the clueless youngster. I discovered Bobby bawling at the kitchen table. She hugged closely as the tears flowed. We remained in that embrace for what seemed like an eternity. Two grown-ups and a confused toddler are clinging together. We eventually parted ways, understanding the importance of attending to the child's needs and making arrangements, drawing on what we understood about Angel's life from our chats with her. We realized she was an only child whose parents had died, with no obvious relatives in the image. It fell to us to care for Eleanor until we could identify which governmental agency should take responsibility. Bobby found some canned tuna and made sandwiches, while I found a juice box and Cheerios for Eleanor. In the middle of sorrow for our late buddy Bobby, my partner and I struggled to devise a strategy for Eleanor. We realized that she was technically in the care of the state and would most certainly wind up in foster care, which neither of us could bear. Perhaps it wasn't the most reasonable option, but we felt it was in Eleanor's best interests to live with one of us for the time being rather than be placed in foster care. If the state is unaware of her, it will not intervene and place her in foster care. She can simply stay with us. They always talk about youngsters falling between the cracks. Eleanor can slip through and join us, I offered. What do you know about raising children? Bobby inquired promptly. To be frank, not much, but I was a child once, I explained. Great. "That's hardly the reassurance I was looking for," she said. For the next hour, we circled around the subject, hoping to establish a good strategy for Eleanor. We eventually decided that I would give up my apartment, move in with Angel, and become the primary caregiver for the child. Bobby promised to help out on a regular basis, in addition to daycare. We were both acutely conscious that neither had prior parenting experience. "Do you know the ancient phrase about the blonde leading the blind?" She said something that made me giggle for the first time that night. "Actually, the blind are guiding the blind." "But your version is unquestionably funnier," I replied. "I'm Oliver Navarro." "It is a pleasure to formally meet you, Bobby," I said, holding out my hand for a handshake. She briefly looked at my hand before catching my gaze. Instead of shaking hands, she went forward and embraced me in an emotional hug. "God, I'm going to miss her so much," she whispered. "Me too," was all I could say in return. The next morning, I called my boss and explained that I needed a couple of personal days to straighten things out with Eleanor. Bobby and I decided to have Angel's body burned. Eleanor, Bobby, and I took a few weeks to settle into a pattern. Bobby came to the flat virtually every evening after work, and we shared cooking chores. It became clear why Angel liked her. She had brilliance, comedy, and a bit of sass reminiscent of Angel. In addition, she was tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and curvy. I treasured her companionship and felt her absence on the few nights she did not visit. Bobby and I spent many nights discussing our feelings for Angel. After 3 months, a nervous Bobby approached me one evening after putting Eleanor to bed. I sat at one end of the living room sofa, and Bobby sat next to me, her legs comfortably crossed, her feet. "Most women can achieve things effortlessly, whereas most males struggle." "Yes," I prodded, dragging out the word with suspense. "Oliver, what are your thoughts on us having a larger apartment and me moving in with you two full-time?" she proposed. "It would be more cost-effective for both of us, and we could provide better care for Eleanor together." I felt deeply for the child, and I suppose I aspire to be like her mother in some way, and you might be like her father. I know you care for her too. We do not need to be married to raise a child. In fact, with both of us at home, we could continue our respective social lives. And because we're friends rather than romantic partners, we should be less likely to split up. All right, you do not have to say it the way my wife and I do. Bobby was definitely attractive, but knowing she was interested in women, I never contemplated making a move that would be highly disrespectful. Nonetheless, I'd formed strong affections for her. We both had a tremendous affection for Eleanor. The plan appeared reasonable to me. We are bound by our passion to Eleanor. Perhaps there was no romantic or nighttime tension between us. Bobby and I became close buddies. Our three became a close-knit family, especially when Eleanor began calling us Mommy and Daddy, a practice she learned from other children at daycare. It's amazing how 2 simple words can have such a huge effect on grown-ups. My heart leaped with excitement the first time Eleanor called me Daddy and Bobby. Mommy. Bobby appeared overwhelmed. Eleanor thanked Mommy after she tied her shoes, and Bobby burst into tears before fleeing to the restroom. A few minutes later, Bobby appeared with tears in her eyes and a smile on her face. "Mommy, it got to me too," I confessed. She lightly punched my arm, and I smiled and nodded. With the exception of Bobby and I never engaging in normal husband and wife love, I felt we fit in well with Eleanor's parents, schoolmates, and acquaintances during social occasions in the years that followed. When asked, we were open about not being married and avoided talking about childbirth. I was quite astonished when Vivian, yes, Vivian, showed up at our door one Saturday morning, 4 years after I left her. "Someone is here for you, Oliver." Bobby called from the living room, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with Eleonora, playing with blocks. Eleanor followed me into the living room, and I wasn't sure who was more surprised, me or Vivian. Is she yours? Q. My wife inquired, her gaze locked on Eleanor as if she had witnessed a ghost. I had to shut my open lips to respond. "Well, she's ours," I said, gesturing between Bobby and myself. "Yours, she cannot be yours. We are still married." Vivian was clearly struggling and about to collapse to the floor. I motioned for her to take a seat on our sofa. She complied without hesitation. "Relax, Viv. Bobby and I may not be married, but Eleanor remains our daughter." I comforted her. "That's rather reassuring. We can deal with that," Vivian mumbled. "What are you getting at, Vivian? Why have you returned after all this time? Aren't we divorced by now? I questioned quickly. To my amazement, I learned that I was still legally married to Vivian. She hadn't filed for divorce because she expected me to return to her within the first year. Then she and her father spent nearly 2 years looking for me before she had the courage to approach me about reconciliation. Reconciliation? Seriously? Why now? I fired back swiftly. I haven't really recovered from you after 4 years, tearing my heart out and acting like the Wicked Witch of the West. Frankly, a lifetime would be insufficient. You know I adore you. I always have, and I always will. Vivian stated, I made a terrible mistake, but it was still a mistake. I apologize for what I did, and I apologize for trying to take advantage of your goodwill. I figured if I surprised you enough, you'd be overwhelmed and have no choice but to return to me. I also didn't think you'd leave me merely for some weekend intimacy. It was simply intimacy, not love. Wasn't the thought of having children and sharing our life together worth more than a weekend of pleasure? You knew me better than everyone else, I responded. You were aware of my beliefs on loyalty. You openly disregard them. I will not tolerate that type of disrespect from anyone, not even my lovely wife. She scanned the room, focusing briefly on Bobby and Eleanor. You seem to have recovered fairly well, she commented, almost as if you hadn't missed a beat. You are awful, boss. Back home, you were very well taken care of. He continued telling Dad's detectives that Quincy Navarro no longer worked there, even if you had recently changed workplaces and began using your middle name. Dad eventually acquired a court order to see Bishop's work records, which is when he realized your middle name is Oliver. After that, all I needed was the confidence to approach you. All right. You have approached me, I replied. Even if I were the biggest moron in history, I would never sacrifice my family for anything. I have a lovely woman in my life whom I admire and fully trust. We have a profound respect for one another. We have a lovely girl who we will adore long after she has matured into a lovely woman. We're a team. I enjoy being part of a team. Remember when I told you there's no I in the team? There's no I in us. My voice had raised dramatically, almost to a yell. Vivian looked at Bobby and Eleanor briefly, as if she was truly sorry. I moved over to my loved ones and held them firmly. I whispered to my tiny girl, Everything will be well, dear. I understand now, Q. Vivian said softly, looking at us. I'll file for divorce on the grounds of abandonment as soon as I get back home. I don't need anything from you financially. But would it be too much to ask for your forgiveness for being so selfish? I'll do my best, Viv, but that's all I can promise. Perhaps with time, I trailed off. Vivian rose from the sofa, offered me a half smile, and exited the apartment, and hopefully my life forever. Bobby sent Eleanor upstairs to play and then guided me to the sofa where she sat beside me with our knees, touching, mirroring the look Eleanor had given moments earlier. Did you mean what you said to your wife a few minutes ago about us being in us? She asked. Absolutely, I replied. I understand. We don't have romantic feelings for each other. But I do love you. I trust you, completely respect you, and believe you respect me too. And I know you care for both of us as a unit, you understand? I do, she said, simply smiling brightly. Despite finally getting divorced, I didn't feel compelled to dive headfirst into dating. That wasn't me. Before marriage and with a family now, it was even less of a priority. While I still had some fun, occasionally finding the next Mrs. Navarro wasn't my focus. Bobby dated more frequently and had a busier social life. We stayed in constant communication about our dating lives, always prioritizing our daughter. We also had a rule against bringing dates home except for meals. When Eleanor was around 11, Bobby and I decided it was time to tell her the truth about our family. On the night we planned to do so, both of us were a nervous wrecks. We had been discussing this for nearly a year. That night, the three of us cried a lot. We shared photos of Eleanor's birth mother and explained her connection to both Bobby and me. We also had to discuss Angel's bisexuality and Bobby's lesbianism, and of course we had to explain decision not to relinquish Eleanor to the state, but to raise her ourselves. So we're not bound by blood. We're bound by love, Bobby concluded. I could tell Eleanor was puzzled and anxious for days as she processed what Bobby and I had told her. She was a bright and mature child, and after a few days it seemed to click for her. You guys could have just let child services take me. Wouldn't that have been easier for you both? She asked during dinner. Doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing, I replied. I've never regretted my decision. Except maybe when you threw a birthday cake all over my new suit when you were 6. And I'm sure Mom hasn't regretted it either. Bobby, tears in her eyes, nodded as she wiped her nose with a tissue. Apart from our own friends, Bobby and I had built friendships as a couple, and occasionally we went out with some of those friends. Bobby loved to dance, so we indulged in that occasionally. She was a better dancer than I was, but I worked hard to keep up. Our friends, most of whom knew we weren't a couple, often remarked on how good we looked together. Bobby occasionally danced with other friends when we went out, but she always avoided accepting invitations from unfamiliar men for obvious reasons. Despite her attractiveness, she never lacked attention from either gender. While most men respected her gentle refusals, not all did. Upon returning to our table after dancing with our friend John, a man approximately 10 years, her junior took issue with her rejection. "Come on, darling. I'm better than the guy you were just dancing with or the one you're sitting with. Give me a chance," he demanded, gripping her wrist and attempting to pull her back onto the dance floor. Although I'm fairly slender at 6'2" and pound 180, I was still in good shape at 41. And regardless, I couldn't stand by while someone mistreated a friend. I firmly grasped the arm holding Bobby's wrist and twisted. The young man yelped in pain and released Bobby's wrist, a grave mistake freed from his grip. Bobby swiftly turned toward him and delivered a well-placed knee strike. Did I mention she played college? The young man collapsed to the floor, his face meeting the table on the way down. When the bar manager and the bouncer came to our table, they found a young man curled up in the fetal position with his face drenched in red liquid. The police were summoned, and after providing our statements, we were assured that neither Bobby nor I would face any charges. I'm grateful for the assistance, but Clarkson's daughters were already proficient in self-defense when we began dating, no matter who we were dating at the time. "That young man made a serious error tonight," remarked Bobby. "I admire your dad's approach. Let's have him teach Eleanor next time he and your mom visit." I suggested having moved into a 5-bedroom home a couple of years prior and undertaken some renovations. We essentially had the equivalent of 2 bedrooms with ensuite. Additionally, we had a spacious family room with a built-in snack area, making our home a popular hangout spot for Eleanor and her friends. Bobby and I naturally assumed the role of surrogate parents to several teens, and truthfully, we both enjoyed it immensely. I became aware that Bobby had been seeing the same woman for approximately 2 months when she extended an invitation for her to join Eleanor and me for Saturday dinner. I deduced that this woman must hold a special place in Bobby's heart when she firmly kicked me out of the kitchen and prepared what I considered to be her best dish: veal parmigiana with spaghetti. Stephanie Ellis appeared strikingly impressive at first glance. If Bobby was rated an 8 to a 9, Stephanie easily scored a solid 9 to a 9.5. With her large brown eyes, flawless porcelain complexion, curly shoulder length, dark brown hair, and a figure reminiscent of a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. "Dad, seriously, you should let Mom play matchmaker for you. She has a talent for it," Eleanor whispered to me shortly after Stephanie arrived. "Yeah, you might be onto something there, sweetheart," I replied. Stephanie not only impressed with her appearance, but also with her personality. I found her likable. Eleanor quickly grew fond of her and Bobby. Well, Bobby was head over heels in love. It warmed my heart to witness the joy in Bobby's eyes. Whenever Stephanie entered the room, it stirred a hint of envy in me, reminding me of days long past, buried deep within my memory. Although it took Stephanie some time to adjust to our family dynamic and the exceptionally close bond between Bobby and me, she eventually settled in. Bobby and I shared a unique relationship as co-parents of a child we had raised since she was 2, and our connection surpassed that of mere best friends. We confided in each other about everything from the trivial to the profound. I was taken aback when Stephanie called me a few weeks into her regular visits to ask if we could meet for lunch and requested that I keep it a secret from Bobby. I reluctantly agreed. 2 days later, I found myself seated at a restaurant when Stephanie entered, spotted me, and made her way over to my table. As she sat down, I noticed the envy on the faces of several men, and I couldn't help but quietly chuckle. Often, fantasies surpass reality. After exchanging pleasantries, placing our orders, Stephanie wasted no time delving into the main topic. She expressed her uncertainty about Bobby's relationship with me and her reluctance to become involved with a woman who might already be in a committed relationship. My response elicited a concerned look from Stephanie. Wow, if only were the case. Women as beautiful as Bobby don't typically date guys like me. Even if she weren't a lesbian, I'll take it as a sort of compliment, I remarked. But you're correct. We do share a loving relationship, one that requires some explanation and explain. I did for the next hour. We both ended up working late, but before parting ways, Stephanie had gained a much clearer understanding of our family dynamics and a newfound appreciation for rye whiskey. All right, count me in, she declared. I'd be honored to be part of this family. 6 months later, Bobby and Stephanie tied the knot. Since Bobby's father had passed away years earlier, I had the privilege of walking her down the aisle. 15-year-old Eleanor served as one of her bridesmaids. Eleanor bore a striking resemblance to her late biological mother, with her red hair and blue eyes. I couldn't help but feel apprehensive about being the father of a teenage girl in high school. Recalling my own experiences as a teenage boy, according to Bobby and Stephanie, I didn't navigate it well once. Bobby vehemently objected to the idea of threatening high schoolers with physical harm for kissing his daughter. Bobby protested, recalling a particular incident when Eleanor went out on a date. Did you see how embarrassed she was? You completely humiliated her. I agree. You won't be meeting her dates anymore, Stephanie chimed in. I'm certain one of us can convey your wishes to them effectively in the future. Yes. The women insisted on an apology from me if I were to date women instead. Would you react the same way, Dad? Eleanor inquired. Probably not. But then you'd have to deal with Mom and Stephanie. That wouldn't be any easier for your date, I remarked. Eleanor paused thoughtfully for a moment, her face betraying various emotions. Wow. As much as I hate to admit it, that might be even worse, she conceded. I chuckled, feeling relieved as she walked away. Are there any words more dreaded by a man than we need to talk? The answer is a resounding no. However, given my family dynamics, I was more puzzled than anxious when Bobby uttered those words one Friday evening while Eleanor was out with friends. She led me to our formal living room, a space typically reserved for guests. A visibly nervous Stephanie was already there, and she handed me a shot glass filled with what looked like Angel's envy. Rye. When I entered and settled into the wingback chair, she indicated Bobby sat next to Stephanie on the both holding glasses of white wine. I felt completely confused. You've got me figured out, ladies. I sincerely apologize for any wrongdoing and promise not to repeat it. Never, I said sincerely. The two women exchanged confused glances until Bobby figured out the situation. Relax, Oliver. It's not what you think it is, but we'll save this apology in case of another oversight. Okay? Bobby chuckled. I need a favor, she continued hesitantly. She looked at me, then swallowed nervously, trying to speak but without success. Stephanie finally intervened. Is it possible? Could we borrow some of our white stuff? Oliver blurted. Stephanie. There was an awkward silence in the room as we exchanged glances. Peep, excuse me. I stumbled. Shit, why is it so difficult? Muttered Bobby Oliver. Stephanie and I want to have a baby and we're wondering if you'd be willing to provide the material for that. Would you agree to do this for us? It took me a few moments to fully comprehend what had just happened. Then a wide grin spread across my face, evolving into one of the biggest smiles I've ever worn. Hell yeah, I exclaimed, igniting a joyous uproar in the room as the two women bounced up and down beside me like hyperactive fifth graders. How did you both choose me? Why me? I inquired. Once the excitement settled and we returned to our seats, they exchanged glances, both sporting broad smiles. Picking you was a breeze compared to asking you, Stephanie remarked. I know it might be hard to believe, but we chose you because of your intelligence, charm, respectfulness, good looks, and fitness, Bobby continued. You're a wonderful father and a fine man. We thought it would be incredible if our child could inherit some of those admirable qualities. Damn, I've only shed tears a handful of times since becoming an adult. That day was one of them. I cried like a newborn. You know, if you guys want, I could sell you my half of the house so you can— No, Bobby interjected. We don't want you to leave. We want you here. We were kind of hoping you'd help us raise our baby like you and I raised Eleanor. I think we did a pretty good job of that, don't you? I must confess I took pride in the upbringing of our daughter, and honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. While I was a bit apprehensive about Stephanie's thoughts, it seemed she had already anticipated them. Stephanie mentioned that research suggests children thrive with both a mother and a father present in the household. Just imagine potential for this child with two mothers, a father and a sister, all before Eleanor goes off to college. Stephanie remarked amidst tears and sniffles. I managed to express my gratitude. I love you all so much, you know, I said, tears streaming down my face. That evening at dinner, we disclosed our plans to Eleanor. She leapt out of her chair, embracing Bobby and Stephanie. Wow, I'm going to be a big sister. How amazing is that? She exclaimed with joy. 2 months later, Bobby, Eleanor, and I eagerly awaited Stephanie's emergence from their bedrooms en suite to confirm her pregnancy. When she appeared with tears of joy, we shared a heartfelt group hug on a deeply personal level. My mind was overwhelmed with emotions. Just over 13 years ago, I thought I'd never experience parenthood. Now I was only months away from welcoming a second child. Indeed, family comes in diverse shapes and forms. I always admired Eleanor's intellect and growing maturity over time. She seemed to handle the unique dynamics of our family with grace, even when faced with occasional teasing from peers. Despite potential challenges like Bobby being a lesbian, Bobby and I not being married, and each of us having different last names. Eleanor rarely voiced complaints about any hardships she faced. As our family expanded to include more individuals and surnames, we opted to maintain Eleanor's original last, as it was already on her birth certificate. Despite any outside scrutiny, Eleanor remained popular among her classmates, often bringing them to our house for gatherings, whether they were from the soccer team or band. While children tended to be more accepting, some adults weren't as understanding. Occasionally caught wind of gossip from other adults, but it usually quieted down in our presence. Perhaps it was because few wanted to confront me, and even fewer dared to challenge. Known for her sharp wit when defending our family, Eleanor ended up as the second highest-ranking student in her class and had to deliver a speech at graduation. Despite my knack for words when I offered to assist her, she insisted I had already contributed enough and didn't require additional aid. Interestingly, she never the speech in my presence, nor in front of Bobby and Stephanie. It seemed I would have to wait along with everyone else to hear it. On graduation day, as Bobby, Stephanie, and I entered the gym with Roman Alexander Ellis, who was almost a year old, we were frequently stopped by women admiring the baby, causing delays. Eleanor's speech was scheduled as the second address of the ceremony, and I couldn't help but smile when I saw the title. There's no I in team printed in the program. The essence of her speech revolved around the idea that collective effort can overcome individual weaknesses. Emphasizing the significance of unity and cooperation, she used our family's differences as an illustration of how, for now, 5 individuals can function as a successful full unit. I'm certain I stood a little taller that afternoon. Eleanor's words moved many to tears. The entire family embarked on a trip to Arizona State University to drop off Eleanor for her freshman year. We departed Santa Fe 5 days ahead of schedule, taking part in various tourist activities before parting ways with her. As we prepared to leave, we formed a line to give final hugs. I found myself at the end of the line, and upon reflecting later, I realized the order wasn't arbitrary. "Dad, promise me you'll make more effort to find a good partner," she whispered to me as the others made their way back to the car. "I know it wasn't a priority for you while I was at home, but now that I'm gone, Mom has a good partner. You deserve one, too. I'll do my best. But I can't guarantee," I replied in the same hushed tone. "Good partners like Stephanie aren't easy to come by, you know." It seemed natural that Roman started calling me Daddy as he began to talk, and my heart swelled each time. What caught me off guard was his use of Mommy for both Bobby and Stephanie, yet they always knew which one he meant. I couldn't discern any difference in his pronunciation, but somehow the two women understood perfectly. 2 years after Eleanor graduated from Arizona State University, she granted me the immense honor of walking her down the aisle for her wedding. That was pretty much my sole responsibility for the event, as my daughter Bobby and Stephanie handled all the major tasks with smiles and laughter. My role mainly involved contributing financially and keeping 7-year-old Roman occupied. Although Jack Lassiter appeared to be a fine young man, I couldn't help but assertively warn him against ever harming my daughter. I assured him that I wouldn't intervene in their marriage unless Eleanor was mistreated. When he responded with understanding, albeit in a strained voice, likely due to the single arm chokehold I had him in at the time, I didn't hesitate. Call me overprotective, but as a father, I felt compelled to emphasize the weight of his actions. Despite being in my mid-50s, I maintained good physical shape, hitting the gym 3 days a week. The wedding proceeded flawless. Allie and I made it a point to relish every moment of my daughter's special day. I mingled with guests at every table, indulged in delicious food and drinks, and danced with numerous women. I stood conversing with a group of friends when a lively woman approached me. She had shoulder-length silver hair with streaks of purple, and without hesitation when she seized my right hand and led me toward the dance floor. "Do you have a height requirement for your dance partner, stud?" she quipped as she dragged me onto the floor. Laughter from our nearby companions. "In case you're curious, I'm Aunt Deb." She introduced herself as we found our place on the dance floor. "I'm Jax, Mom's closest friend. I used to change your new son-in-law's diapers occasionally back in the day. My nephew has spoken highly of you, and he warned me about your killer chokehold," she added with a grin. She flashed flawless teeth and lively blue eyes as we began to dance. I discreetly assessed her figure, noting her gymnast-like. As the music played, I discovered she moved with grace during the lively tunes. When a slower song came on, she closed the gap between us almost immediately. "It's clear you hit the gym regularly," Deb remarked. We walked into the bar hand in hand to grab a drink afterward. I had a feeling she was staking her claim, though I didn't mind, however, if she was. She'd have to pass through Bobby and Stephanie, the American equivalent of the Spanish Inquisition. First, I escorted her to our table and introduced her, pleased that my 2 closest friends gave her a brief grace period before launching into their interrogation. "I'll grab you another drink," I said with a grin as I stood up at the bar. Jack's mother approached me, beaming as she glanced at Deb, seated with Bobby and Stephanie. "She's quite a character, but I've heard you 3 are fiercely protective of each other. Let's see how she handles the scrutiny," Marcia Lassiter remarked. "Wait a few minutes before you return." And that's exactly what I did. Marcia briefed me on some of Deb's background. She was a year younger than me at 55 and had been married for 15 years before catching her husband cheating about a decade ago. She gave him a swift kick where it hurts and then kicked him out, Marcia recounted. I returned to the table 5 minutes later to find the 3 women in fits of laughter, yet for some reason, I didn't feel nearly as at ease as when I had left. 2-year-old Kayla Lassiter dashed around our spacious home alongside our 2 Labrador retrievers, her laughter echoing through the rooms while her parents relaxed with iced tea at our kitchen table. Joined by 4 of her 6 grandparents, Jack and Eleanor, who lived just 45 minutes away, frequently visited to spend time with our first grandchild, Jack's parents. Marcia and Tom confessed to feeling a tad envious of our frequent visits with Kayla. So we extended an invitation for them to spend Christmas week with us, ensuring that all 6 grandparents and Uncle Roman could celebrate the holiday together. Marcia eagerly accepted, also relishing the opportunity to reunite with her best friend Deb, whom she hadn't seen since Deb and I married and moved to Santa Fe. Tom needed a bit more convincing. Privately, he confessed his discomfort around Bobby and Stephanie, having never interacted closely with lesbians before. "They're just like any other married couple, Tom," I reassured him. "All you need to know is that I trust them implicitly, just as I do with you and Marcia. Well, I must say they're both quite attractive." He admitted I had this idea that lesbians were, well, not like them. I chuckled at his observation, assuring him, "Trust me, they break the stereotype. Don't overthink it, Tom. They're just women. They probably own more shoes than both of us combined." Deb was everything I could have wished for in a wife, even though I didn't realize I needed someone as energetic and dynamic as her while I considered myself laid back. Deb was always on the move, her energy infectious. During the first spring she spent living with us, I had to prepare a garden for her. We read me, then proceeded to plant various salad vegetables while she supervised. I jokingly teased her about being part cat, as cats are renowned as nature's finest overseers. Bobby and Stephanie grew fond of her emotionally, almost as swiftly as I did, literally. However, That didn't deter them from cautioning her before our marriage that they would fiercely protect me if she ever caused me any pain. She appeared quite shaken when she confided in me the day after their warning. "I'm pretty sure they weren't joking, babe," I remarked solemnly. "We always have each other's backs. I know they weren't joking. I don't intend to hurt you ever. But if I do, I won't stick around. I'll disappear in a flash. It's called self-preservation," she stated. Deb persuaded Marcia and Tom that Santa Fe would be an ideal place to retire. And that's precisely what they did. 8 years later, they retired a bit earlier than planned when the house next to ours became available for sale. Tom became fully enthusiastic when he discovered that Bobby was also a fan of the Premier League. Bobby supported Arsenal while Tom's allegiance lay with Crystal Palace. It was akin to being in an English pub during a match, although things got a bit heated when their teams faced off. "Fuck off, bitch, and eat shit, old man," were not uncommon exchanges when we all gathered to watch Arsenal and Crystal Palace compete. We learned that football fans soccer, too. Americans are much more passionate than baseball fans, as Deb, Stephanie, Marcia, and I soon discovered. Jack and Eleanor refrained from bringing their 3 grandchildren along. When Arsenal and Crystal Palace played, it was a delightful summer evening in Santa Fe, and I sat on my porch swing on the deck behind my house, enjoying a shot of Jameson Black Barrel Irish whiskey, reflecting on my good fortune. My eldest grandchild emerged from the back door and joined me, resting her slender frame against mine. Once again, I couldn't help but notice her striking resemblance to her late grandmother with her dark red hair and bright blue eyes. "What's on your mind, Granado?" she inquired, using her special nickname for me. "I was just thinking about my life, about how fortunate I've been," I replied. "How so?" she asked curiously. I took a sip of whiskey, pondering how to explain to a 9-year-old. "Well, sweetheart, you know when something bad happens. But then everything ends up okay anyway. That's sort of how it's been for me." She shifted beside me, her eyes reflecting deep thought. Then her face lit up with understanding. "Yeah, like when I scraped my knee the other day and Grandma Deb gave me ice cream," she exclaimed. I smiled at Kayla and she grinned back, satisfied that she had grasped the concept exactly like that, darling. Here is the next story. I ask myself, what do people actually want? I put my heart and soul into being the best husband I can possibly be for my wife, Nora. Yet all I seem to receive in return is disrespect, especially from her and her circle of friends. A little bit of backstory about me and my wife. Nora and I met during our college days at a lively party thrown by one of her friends. There was an instant connection between us and we hit it off right away. We exchanged numbers that night, and shortly after I took her out on our first date. Fast forward, and here we are, happily married for about a year. I'm 30 years old and Nora is 29, met professionally. I work as a software engineer in a prominent tech company, which fortunately means I earn quite well. However, despite my efforts to provide for us and create a comfortable life, I've noticed a concerning pattern. My wife and her friends have developed a habit of mocking me, whether I'm present or not. And what's worse is that Nora never stands up for me in these situations. Nora's behavior and attitude towards work and responsibility have been a constant source of frustration for me. Despite all that I do for her, she seems to take it all for granted. It's like she has gotten accustomed to me handling everything from paying bills to taking care of household matters. The problem isn't just that she can't hold down a job, it's her whole approach towards working life. Even back when we were dating in college, Nora has always displayed signs of laziness and a lack of commitment. She would jump from one job to another and never stayed at a place for more than a month or two. It's a cycle that has always repeated itself over the years, and it's incredibly frustrating to witness. She barely graduated from college, and most of her projects were done by me out of fear that she wouldn't put in the effort herself. What's even more concerning is Nora's tendency to avoid responsibility and shift blame onto others. She never takes ownership of her actions or lack thereof. Instead, she blames professors, lecturers, co-workers, bosses, anyone but herself. It's always some excuse about why she can't stay at a job or why things aren't working out for her. It's always someone else's fault, according to her, whether it's the job being too stressful, her co-workers not liking her, her professors back in college, failing her on purpose, or her boss having a personal vendetta against her. Her lazy attitude towards job searching is equally infuriating. I have to practically push her to even start looking for a job, and when she does, it's half-hearted at best. It's like she expects everything to be handed to her without putting in the effort or taking any responsible party for her own success or failures. Nora's friends have also really messed with her head and keep feeding her outdated ideas about what men and women should do. They've convinced her that I should be the one paying all the bills while she just sits at home looking pretty. It's ridiculous, especially since we don't have any kids to take care of. I've tried explaining to her that it doesn't make sense for her to stay home all day doing nothing, but she keeps pushing for it and arguing about it. It's really crazy considering her buddies are unmarried and pay their own bills. They are continually complaining about how no one wants them. But who would want someone who thinks like that before leaving her previous job? She only stayed there for 3 months. Nora's friends would continuously tease me for not being man enough to let her stay at home. They'd label me selfish and greedy, saying that since I make decent money, I should let Nora stay at home. And I told Nora repeatedly that I don't like her pals and don't want her with them. But she brushes it aside, saying, "I'm insecure because I don't have many friends." But the truth is that I'd rather not have any pals who mingle with the types of individuals Nora does. Now, her pals believe that a male should battle for a cheating partner to prove his love. They say that if a man doesn't battle for his partner after she cheats, he has never truly loved her. It is gibberish. And I've tried to tell Nora this, but she won't listen. When I ask her friends about the double standard of loyalty for men and women, and if that meant a woman should battle for a cheating man, they accused me of being outdated or even sexist, and it differs between men and women. When I ask if this implies that men and women are unequal, they fumble again. And their only response is to accuse me of sexism. Nora's decision to stay at home due to what her buddy said has caused a major headache at home, despite the fact that she is now responsible for cleaning up, cooking, and washing the dishes. I'm usually stuck doing that. It's so unpleasant to come home from work exhausted and find the house in disarray, especially when Nora could easily help but chooses not to. To make matters worse, Nora routinely invites her pals over, who leave the place even worse without cleaning up. When I bring this up with Nora, she dismisses it, arguing that I am being overly demanding and do not understand the difficulties of being a stay-at-home wife. It's a daily effort to persuade her of the need of contributing to the home, especially because she doesn't make any money. What's more aggravating is her friends' effect on her attitude toward responsibility. They've convinced her that she doesn't have to answer to anyone, including her spouse. Nora once packed and left for a weekend excursion with her friends without alerting me. They regarded disclosing her location or informing me of her plans as dominating and misogynistic behavior. They have portrayed me as an aggressive partner simply because I want fundamental communication and honesty in our relationship. For me, it's not about having control. It's all about safety and trust. If Nora does not tell me where she is, how can I secure her safety if something goes wrong? It's common sense and a concern for each other's well-being. However, her pals have twisted this into a matter of control and tyranny, which is completely preposterous and absurd. Communication and honesty are essential components of any healthy relationship. However, Nora and her pals appear to have forgotten these values. For a long time, I put up with it all because I adore my wife. Sure, she had shortcomings. She was readily influenced by her friends. She could be sluggish at times, but she was still the lady I married, and I didn't mind taking up the slack. I realized that everyone had difficulties, and I was willing to help her through them all. The tipping moment for me was like a floodgate opening after being filled with rage and frustration for so long. It was more than one thing that pushed me over the edge. It was a massive pile of crap that kept piling up until I couldn't stand it any longer. Looking back, I see that I should have put my foot down from the start, but I believe I let it slip because I didn't want to rock the boat and harm Nora's relationship with her friends. They were tormenting me relentlessly, and they made sure it affected every aspect of my existence. They'd mocked the things I enjoyed, labeling me a nerd or a freak and dismissing my interests as the most absurd things in the world, as well as my clumsiness. They made that their preferred target, particularly in large crowds or gatherings. They'd laugh at my every stumble joke about my lack of social skills, as if they loved making me feel uncomfortable. What hurt the most was seeing Nora participate or laugh along. She understood how much their taunting hurt me, yet she ignored or even exacerbated it. Sometimes it felt like a slap in the face, as if she was more concerned with fitting in with her pals than with how I felt. Even when she realized how unhappy I was, she refused to speak up or beg them to stop. It made me wonder if she genuinely respected me or if I was simply a joke to her. The mocking did not stop with my interests or social abilities. They also targeted my connection with Nora and used nasty language to undermine it. They'd use the word simp as if it were an insult of the highest degree. They would use it to humiliate and emasculate me. Their demeanor was never playful or pleasant. It was usually harsh, insulting, and full of disdain. They'd say I was meek and weak, that I'd do anything. Nora inquired without hesitation. The way they discussed it indicated that they thought less of me for it. Nora would usually laugh along with them and reinforce their cruel statements, rather than defend me. It stung so much to see her join in because it seemed like she agreed with them about how they perceived me. A particularly terrible occurrence occurred at one of her friends' birthday parties. It was a large party, and I wanted us to leave once it was over. But Nora suggested that we stay for along because no one was going yet. They then began openly insulting me for being a symbol, instead of shutting down. Nora joined in the ridicule, describing times and situations when I had accommodated her demands or placed her needs first. She was simply airing our intimate moments for everyone's enjoyment. They did not stop there. Despite the fact that I'm intelligent, they criticized me. They'd compare me to Sheldon from Young Sheldon in a really derogatory way, labeling me a strange for it. They made it appear as if being smart was a defect, and they would rather mock me than acknowledge my intelligence. They didn't only mock me for my hobbies or social abilities. It felt as if they had a personal grudge against every aspect of my existence, regardless of how good or significant it was. They seemed to be on a mission to nitpick and insult everything for the purpose of it. Take my job in the IT industry as an example. Instead of recognizing the benefits of having a high-paying IT career, they turned it into something negative. They said that tech workers were recluse control freaks who relished being abusive, a nonsensical stereotype that has no basis in reality. They mocked even my appearance. Despite my efforts to stay active, go to the gym on a regular basis, and care for myself, they found ways to make it a joke. They'd insulted me by comparing my blonde hair to a Ken doll. They even ridiculed my gym program, claiming that people in technology shouldn't care about fitness, which made no sense whatsoever. One event that really irritated me was when they messed with something as important as our home ownership. This house was a wedding gift from my mother, and it was obviously in my name because to my mother's misgivings about Nora. She doesn't like Nora anymore. My mother was not one to cause difficulty or be petty, but she did want to ensure that the house remained under my possession, which I completely understood. Nora initially had no objections to this arrangement, but after speaking with her friends, they instilled in her the bizarre notion that everything I had instantly became hers as my partner, while everything she owned remained completely hers. It was as if they were attempting to change the rules of cooperation. They informed her that, as my partner, she deserved full ownership of the house. This stupid idea they instilled in her has created unnecessary drama and pressured Nora to want full ownership of the house while entirely disregarding my mother's intentions, despite my attempts to find a medium ground by suggesting shared ownership. Nora and her companions insisted on their ridiculous demands. When I remained firm and refused to yield because why the hell would I give you complete control of a house? I was gifted. They eventually told Nora to accept the compromise, but the harm was already done. Their interference and manipulation had strained our relationship so severely that I was no longer willing to give in to their ridiculous demands, and I refused to even include Nora's name on the document of joint ownership. The breaking point for me was yesterday, Friday night, which turned into a nightmare. Nora demanded that I join her and her friends for drinks and dinner. Now, I'm not a fan of Nora's friends, and the prospect of spending the evening with them didn't excite me. They weren't my crowd. They were Nora's. Nora persisted, saying I needed to socialize more. Reluctantly, I agreed. Net. Nora's pals expressed hunger and advised that we go to a restaurant before drinking at a pub. Nora informed me that she was also hungry, and we all agreed. We ended up in a posh restaurant, the kind that is a little pricey but not overly extravagant for me. I noticed Nora's friends purchasing rather pricey foods, which struck me as unusual given their meager earnings. However, I dismissed it because I assumed someone else in the group had informed them they would pay the bill. Nora also requested something expensive, but I was willing to cover it. After all, I wanted her to enjoy herself at dinner, but they turned it into a roast fest, criticizing and gossiping about me right in front of my face. I chose to ignore them, concentrating on my food and attempting not to let their pessimism spoil the dinner. But then, after we finished eating, the waiter inquired if we were receiving separate checks. To my complete surprise, Nora's buddies announced that I was footing the cost for everyone. This was the tipping point for me. I couldn't control my rage any longer. I demanded to know why they expected I would pay the bill since I had never agreed to it in the first place. Their lame explanation was that I received a consistent six-figure salary while no one else at the table did. That excuse was completely ludicrous. Just because I made a lot of money did not imply I had to pay for everyone's expenses, especially after being mocked and disrespected all night. It was not about the money. It was about respect and decency, things they obviously lacked. Things got out of hand when Nora joined her pals and demanded that I pay. I refused because I was unwilling to pay for a supper for folks who had just mocked and belittled me all evening. They responded by insulting me further, stating I couldn't take a joke and was weak. I held firm, demanding separate checks and paying exclusively for Nora and me. Of course, I gave a generous tip for the server, who did not deserve the inconvenience created by Nora's pals. As I prepared to leave, I issued Nora an ultimatum. Either she left with me or it ended. At first, she wanted to insist on staying, but one look at my face revealed that I was really angry, and so she unwillingly joined me. When we came home, Nora lost her cool and yelled at me. She labeled me stingy and selfish for refusing to pay despite having the resources. I attempted to convey that it wasn't about the money but about principles, but she dismissed it. She explained that her buddies were merely joking, and I was too insecure to take it. I ignored her and went to bed, because I had nothing else to say. She had joined her friends in embarrassing me and was now upset that I no longer wanted to do everything for her. The next morning, things were still pretty cold, to say the least. She didn't even bother saying good morning and maintained her silent treatment. I decided not to go out of my way to prepare breakfast, as I always do on weekends. We avoided each other for hours before she approached me. She delivered her ultimatum. If I wanted her to stop ignoring me, I had to pay her friend's expensive dinner bill. She claimed that they were still upset about what they saw as my shameful behavior and selfishness. I couldn't believe what I was hearing after all that had happened. She asked me to pay money to satisfy her friend's injured egos. My response was direct and straightforward. I flatly rejected and told her to forget it. She then threatened to withdraw funds from our joint account to pay the bill. That was a line I would not allow her to cross. I firmly cautioned her that if she tried to access our joint funds without my permission, she'd better start seeking for work to replace the money. Naturally, my refusal irritated her again, and she returned to giving me the cold shoulder. So that is my dilemma. I am now writing this from the kitchen, LOL. I am so angry and disrespectful. Honestly, I feel like an idiot. Any help on how to handle this shit show would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening. Update. Hello, everyone. It's been about 5 hours since I blogged about my rage and irritation here, LOL, and I'd like to thank everyone for their tremendous support and suggestions. Honestly, I didn't anticipate this post to go so viral, but your comments and messages have really struck a chord with me, and many of you have pointed out something I hadn't understood before. My wife's actions and behaviors have demonstrated a lack of love and respect for me. It's eye-opening to see so many people sharing the same feelings I've been experiencing. Your acknowledgement of my rage and dissatisfaction has been extremely reassuring. And now I know that I'm not insecure, and certainly not at blame. Some of you said that I should have stopped things long ago, and looking back I realized that continuing in this relationship was a mistake. Association with toxic acquaintances, as well as her disrespect for my sentiments, were apparent warning flags that I should have recognized sooner. It's a difficult reality, but I appreciate the candor in your thoughts. I've also received some creative recommendations about how to address this scenario. Many of you suggested that I seek legal advice. I will surely talk with a lawyer to understand my choices moving forward. It has just been roughly 5 hours since my last update. So what's going on right now? Not much, nor is it still far and preparing to leave without telling me where. Once she has left, I want to safeguard our joint account to prevent further misuse of monies. I'm certain she's going out with those buddies, and I'm not going to allow her waste my money on such nasty individuals. It's time for me to quit being complacent and regain control of my life. I've also realized that this relationship has reached its limit, and I'm definitely getting divorced. But I'm not going to let Nora off easy. Given how deeply this situation has touched me, I will attempt to keep you all posted as events unfold. Thank you again for your help and advice. I sincerely appreciate it. Update. Hey Reddit, this is me, and I'm back with another update. I appreciate everyone's support and wisdom in the comments and on DMS. It's been quite the ride since my previous update, so let me catch you up on what's been going on since the issue with the shared account. Nora was outraged when she discovered I had withdrew all of the money. She was especially furious because she had promised to cover her friend's expenditures for the evening. This situation escalated into a heated confrontation in which she accused me of being unfair and controlling. I responded by suggesting she obtain a job if she didn't want me to control her. I informed her that we would now solely use the joint account for bills. This did not sit well with her, and she threatened to leave if I did not return the money right away. I kept my position, ignored her, and went to my office to lock myself in. She hadn't expected that. She expected me to give in, as I often did. Since then, I've been looking for ways to play mild pranks on Nora. For example, I intentionally placed realistic-looking artificial bugs throughout the house, knowing she is scared of them. The emotions were priceless, and when she questioned me about it, I turned the tables, calling her insecure for not being able to take a joke and claiming that I was only messing about. Another trick I've started doing is setting many alarms in the morning. Nora liked to sleep in. However, I have to get up early for work. Although I used to dread alarms since they interrupted her sleep, I now utilize them to avoid oversleeping. She's been whining since she's a light sleeper, which has been driving her insane. But I have claimed that they are required for my job. I've also escalated my retribution on Nora by playing mind tricks and having her question her own sanity. How can I do it? It's all about subtly moving things around our home, and when Nora observes and questions me about it, I behave as if I have no idea what she is talking about. Sometimes I'll act perplexed and question her memory, making her wonder if she's losing it. But that's only the beginning. I've been planning talks and arrangements with Nora just to subsequently deny that they ever happened. It's like gaslighting on steroids. This repeated manipulation causes Nora to doubt herself and wonder if she can trust her own thinking or if she is simply dreaming things. Last night, however, was the cherry on top. Nora expressed concern that she may have dementia. It literally took all in me not to laugh. The fact that I've pushed her to examine her mental health is both bizarre and rewarding. I realize it's cruel, but she deserves it. While I've been playing mind games with Nora, I've also been carefully preparing our split. It is not simply about divorcing her. I want to make sure she is absolutely alone once I leave the image. I've already contacted my lawyer and started working on divorce papers. The truth is, I haven't told Nora anything about this. She believes we are just going through a hard time, unaware that I want to abandon her for good. It may appear harsh, but I believe it is vital for both of us to move forward individually. One of the most difficult issues I'm experiencing is the house. Legally, the house is mine, but it is also Nora's primary address, so I can't just push her out without going through a lengthy eviction process. I don't want to be stuck living with her for another 6 months or longer. That is why I am considering selling the house without her awareness. It may appear severe, but it's the most effective approach to ensure a clean separation. If I did that, I'd have to temporarily live back in with my mother until I found an apartment or purchased another home. If I may say so, that is a fairly practical plan. I understand that these decisions appear frigid, but they were thoroughly considered. My top objective is to move on from this poisonous circumstance and create a brighter future for myself, even if it involves making difficult decisions along the way. Update a Reddit. It's been a while, but here's the most recent update. Life has been really slow lately, and I honestly forgot to post, so my apologies. Moving on to the real update. Nora has finally moved out of my place. I should have kicked her out a long time ago, but I finally did it. How did I do it? So I thought that if I was going to kick her out, I should do so with one final big statement. So I pulled the ultimate prank. Although it wasn't intended as a prank, but rather as a way to punish her. I replaced her shampoo and conditioner with a hair removal product, and you can guess what occurred next. She used it multiple times before understanding what was going on, which surprised me given the hair remover's obvious fragrance and reaction. As a result, she had an extremely terrible haircut and had pieces of her hair fall off. She was so concerned that she had alopecia that she insisted on going to the hospital for testing. I struggled to control my laughing every time I saw her hair. She didn't leave the house for approximately a week because she was embarrassed by her haircut. During this time, she began hinting that she wanted her pals to pay her a visit. Previously, her friends would come over frequently and make a mess of the house but never clean it. Their visit ended following the incident at the restaurant, where I refused to pay for them. I refused to allow her friends to come over because I knew they would mock me even more. Instead, I suggested she pay them a visit. She worried at first because of her haircut, but I explained that she could easily cover it with a sweater or anything and go meet them. She thought it was an excellent idea and promptly prepared to go. Her friends came to take her up, and I took advantage of the opportunity to pack up all of her possessions and place them outside on the porch. I likewise packed a bag for myself and went to stay with my mother to avoid her yelling and outbursts. When she returned, she found her belongings outdoors. It was my way of expressing, enough is enough. I'm moving on without her drama. After settling in at my mother's place, I understood Nora wasn't the only one who deserved the penalties. Her poisonous companions had a huge influence on her behavior. Most of them had been unfaithful in their relationships or were with their spouses for the wrong reasons. When I looked into Nora's phone and discovered their group conversation, it wasn't simply a joke. I discovered a goldmine of secrets and backstabbing. I took tons of screenshots. I went to social media, specifically Instagram and Facebook, where I discovered their partners' profiles. For those with private Instagram accounts, I contacted their closest friends via Instagram or Facebook and emailed them the damning screenshots. Was it harsh, unkind, or needless for me to do that? Yes. But do they deserve it? Absolutely. Yes. What struck me even more was how they spoke behind each other's backs and through private communications. Despite pretending to be best friends, they were vicious in gossiping about one another. I also gathered evidence of this and sent it back to them so they could see the toxicity in their own circles. But my deeds did not end there. I sent Nora one final message, officially ending things. I made it apparent that I would no longer tolerate her toxic conduct, sought a divorce, and told her that her possessions were waiting for her on the porch. I understood the turmoil that would ensue, particularly from Nora, so I turned off the phone and went to bed. Early the next morning, my mother informed me of the shit show that had occurred. Nora had arrived at my mother's house and raised such a commotion that the neighbors had to contact the police. I could not believe I slept through it all. When I asked my mother why she didn't wake me up, she replied she understood I wanted to avoid Nora, which I admired. But I still felt a little worried. I was just relieved that Nora's outburst didn't turn violent. I guess I was completely drained from all that had happened. When I eventually turned on my phone to check it, I was inundated with texts from Nora offering apologies, begging, insults, and threats. She was clearly spinning, so I chose not to engage with her. I spent the day at my mother's to avoid a conflict at home because who knows, she might have been waiting for me to simply show there. 2 days later, I returned to my home and replaced the locks. Nora's outburst was obvious. Some of her items that she did not remove were scattered around the porch, and the windshield of her automobile, which I purchased but registered in my name, was damaged. I didn't even try to get her to pay for it. I took care of it myself, changed the locks, and returned to my mother's while ignoring all of her attempts to contact me. Update. Hello, Reddit friends. It's been a while since I last updated. I'd like to thank you for all of your encouragement and laughs. It's been an exciting voyage, to say the least. Little has changed on the Nora front. I still have not responded to her on my lawyer's advice to document everything. She'll be served soon, which I'm sure will set her off again. But really, I couldn't care less. So I managed to contact a few acquaintances who are closer to Nora's group than mine. They revealed that Nora had been anxiously ringing around looking for a place to crash. It turns out no one is buying to understand the eviction process because she has my house listed as her primary residence. Legally, I cannot kick her out. but I'm glad I didn't have to house her for another 6 months because I wouldn't have lasted. Meanwhile, I've continued with my little pranks. I enrolled Nora and her friends up for a slew of spam emails. Their inboxes are undoubtedly overflowing now. To top it off, I performed a little prank by posting Nora's phone number on those false celebrity fan sites, stating that certain celebs had leaked contact information. People fall for that crap, so her phone must be overloaded with odd calls. But, well, anything to keep her occupied, right? Update. Hello, Reddit users. It's been a minute since my last update, and I apologize for the silence. I've been dealing with the entire court case, and let me tell you, it's been quite the roller coaster. The good news is that I came away with a big win. Nora did manage to capture some early money, but it was nothing compared to what I kept. Let me break it down for you. After being served, we went through the court process. Things moved quickly in my favor because of my strong evidence and the fact that I had a great counsel. Nora received a little sum of money early on, but happily it will not deplete her savings. I got to keep my house and other possessions, and the court ordered that Nora had to pay for the shattered windshield. Remember, I said I wouldn't force her for it, but since she had some early cash, I brought it up, and she reluctantly agreed to pay. Seeing her rage about it was just an extra bonus. Nora's living circumstances has deteriorated significantly as a result of the entire shit show. She's either sleeping on couches or taking refuge in shelters. She admitted it to me herself, lol, probably to make me feel sorry for her. And after the court spectacle ended, she cursed me and blamed me for everything. Then, in an odd twist, she begged me to take her back. Seriously? One moment you're hurling insults, the next you're seeking reconciliation. I quickly shut that down, telling her it was finished for good. Now I'm focused on myself. I'm getting into self-improvement mode. Given the drama I've been through, I don't see myself dating anytime soon. It's all about my personal development from now on. A huge thank you to everyone who has helped me through this wild adventure. This will probably be my final update. This Reddit post far exceeded my expectations, and I'm grateful for the incredible response. Thank you all so much. Update your Reddit buddies. I am back with another update. Despite the fact that I stated that the last one would be the final chapter, it's encouraging to know that so many of you are still interested in what's going on in my life. So here's a look. Things have improved dramatically since I removed Nora and her toxic entourage from my life. No more ridicule or criticism towards my hobbies or interests. I took the chance to thoroughly clean the house. And let me tell you, maintaining cleanliness without Nora to cause chaos has been a breeze. On the job front, I actually received a promotion. It's been an extremely wonderful acknowledgement of my efforts and perseverance. As for dating, it's still on pause. It might be a while before I get back into that scene, but that's fine. Self-care and priorities are critical right now, lol. I'm not sure where Nora is right now. Last I heard, she was still homeless, which is probably good for her. She appears to be locked in the same job-hopping cycle and is having employment issues as a result of her qualifications, activities, and work history. Despite everything, I am looking forward to a bright future. Thank you for taking time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this article, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to tell about your or someone else's circumstance, please don't hesitate to contact me. Take care.